Hey guys, it's Gina. Welcome to the place where your growth meets mine. Let's talk. Today I want to talk about one psychological concept that, more than almost anything else I've come across, explains the difference between people who change their circumstances and people who don't. Between people who take their life by the hand and people who feel like life is always happening to them. It's called the locus of control, and I promise you by the end of this video you will look at the people around you and yourself completely differently. In 1950s, a psychologist named Julian Rotter was studying how people explain the things that happen in their lives, and he noticed something striking. People who generally fell into two different camps when it came to one fundamental question. Do you believe what happens in your life is mostly within your control or mostly outside of it? He called this question the locus of control. Locus means place in Latin language, the place where you believe control lives. And he identified two types: internal locus of control, which is basically the belief that your outcomes are primarily the result of your own actions, choices, efforts, attitudes. So you believe that you are the author of your life, basically. While external locus of control is the belief that your outcomes are primarily determined by outside forces like luck, other people, fate, or the circumstances. So you believe that you are the character, but in someone else's story. Now, that's a psychological fact. Dozens of studies over decades have found that people which have a strong internal locus of control tend to have a better mental health, or even higher academic achievements, or greater career success. And why is that? This is one of the most robust correlations in personality psychology. The victim mentality versus the author mentality. Now, I need to be very careful here because I do not want to be dismissive. External circumstances are real. Injustice is real. Privilege and disadvantages are real. And I am not here to tell you that everything is purely in your hands and your outcomes, let's say, are entirely your fault. That would be both factually wrong and deeply unkind to you. What I am saying, and what the research supports, is that within your circumstances, however limited or expensive as they are, the way that you relate to them changes everything. So basically, two people can face the same obstacle, but the first person looks at the obstacle and asks, who did this to me? Why does this always happen to me? Like, what's the point of trying when things never change? While the other person looks at it and asks, what can I do? What have I learned? What's my next move? So, same obstacles, but two radically different futures and approaches. Now here's where philosophy and psychology crash into each other in the most beautiful way. Because what Rotter discovered in the mid-20th century was that Epictetus had already articulated it over 2000 years ago from a prison, from a slavery, with no external power whatsoever. Epictetus was born a slave in ancient Rome. He had no rights, no freedom of movement, no control over almost any aspect of his external life, and yet became one of the most profound philosophers of the ancient world. Emperors and senators came to him to hear him speak. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the entire Roman Empire, kept Epictetus' writings with him always. And the core of everything Epictetus taught was this one idea. He called it the dichotomy of control, the division of all things into two categories: what is up to us and what is not up to us. This is a stoic philosophy. Epictetus opens his famous handbook of the Enchiridion with words that translate roughly to: some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion. In short, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are body, our property, reputation, office. In short, whatever is not of our own doing. He taught that suffering comes almost entirely from trying to control things that are not within your power. And freedom, true, unshakable, complete freedom, comes from releasing everything outside your control and investing everything into what is within it. A man who owns nothing and is owned by someone else, teaching the most powerful people in the world about freedom. That is the internal locus of control at its purest. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who talked to himself, and then there is Marcus Aurelius who wrote what we now know as Meditations, which was never meant to be published. It was a private journal. A Roman emperor writing reminders to himself every day about what he could and couldn't control. About staying an author of his character even when external events were catastrophic. He writes about people who betrayed him, about the Roman Empire under constant pressure, about his own mortality. And through all of it, the question he keeps returning to is, what is within my power here? What is my purpose? Not why is this happening to me? Not who is to blame, but what do I do with this? So what does a good person do right now? This is the internal locus in its most disciplined, most practiced form. And you can practice it too. The data is clear. Let me give you a sense of just how broadly locus of control affects a person's life, because the research spans so many areas, it's almost hard to believe. In health, studies consistently show that people with internal locus of control engage in more health-promoting behavior. They exercise more, they eat better, they go to the doctor more regularly, and recover effectively better from illness. Why? Because they believe that their actions matter. So they take action. Scale study found that the internal locus of control in early adulthood predicted significantly higher wages and job satisfaction by midlife, even after controlling for factors like education and intelligence. The belief that your effort matters actually makes your effort more effective. Now I want to talk about the dark side of this, because it's important. Psychologist Martin Seligman did some famous and also quite difficult experiment in the 1960s that led him to discover something he called learned helplessness. The core finding? When living beings are repeatedly exposed to situations where their actions have no effect on outcomes, where nothing they do changes what happens to them. So they eventually stop trying. Even when the situation changes, even when escape is available, they have learned that trying doesn't work. And that lesson is incredibly difficult to unlearn. It can happen to people who have experienced real trauma or systemic exclusion or real repeated failure in the face of genuine effort. The external locus of control isn't always a choice, sometimes it is a scar. And recognizing that having compassion for yourself and others around you is just as important as the work of reclaiming your internal power. You might be questioning, how can I shift my locus inward? Well, the 3 shifts I'm going to talk about are real practices. So here is how you can actually do this. Shift number 1, language. Pay attention to the language that you use when something goes wrong. He made me angry becomes I felt angry. Life is unfair to me might as well become the situation is unfair and I'm going to figure out my response. I have no choice becomes I have a choice that feels very hard. Language is not just description, it's a choice, it's the architecture. The words that you use build the world that you perceive. Now let's move on to shift number 2, the circle of control. Draw a circle in your mind, or literally on a paper if you want to, and inside that circle, your thoughts, your attitude, your effort, your words, your choices. Outside of the circle, draw other people's opinions, outcomes you cannot guarantee, or things that you have already experienced. The weather of the world. Every time your mind goes to the outside of the circle, gently, firmly bring it back. That's outside my circle. What's inside? Now, shift number 3, small wins, but consistently. Seligman, the same psychologist who discovered learned helplessness, also pioneered something called positive psychology. And one of his key findings is that learned helplessness can be reversed through small, repeated experiences of efficacy. Small wins, for example, situations where your action produces a result. This reveals the narrow evidence that you matter, that you have power, that what you do counts. So start small. Do what you said you wouldn't do, even if it's tiny. So you let your brain see that you followed through. That evidence accumulated, and one day you realize that you're no longer there waiting for life to be good to you, but you are in it, you're shaping it, because you're writing it. Now here's what I want to leave you with. Your locus of control is not fixed. It is not your personality type or your destiny. It is a set of beliefs that were built over time. And beliefs can be rebuilt. You are not the effect of your life. You are the cause of your life. So you can become the cause of it starting right now, starting with the next choice that you make. So drop a comment, internal or external. Where do you honestly see yourself right now? And let's talk about it. Hi guys, it's Gina. Welcome to the place where your growth meets mine. I'll see you next time.